I love lists, and this is one of my favorite lists. This is 100 records that set the world on fire while no one was listening from The Wire. Part of why I love the list is because it's a very abstract list. It's not a best of, so it kind of allows us to talk about a lot more like obscure records or even some records that are by famous artists that are just kind of ones that aren't usually talked about because they're not maybe the best or the most popular by those artists. And I listened through all of the records on this album, gave it a little bit of time, listened through all of them again, and I'm going to be tearing this off based on how much it set my personal world on fire. Did I enjoy the listening? Did it kind of set my world on fire and that did it like spark an interest in that artist or that genre or some other, concept or whatever that I was previously unaware of or disinterested in or something like that. And to represent how much it set my world on fire, we're going to be using the Gen 1 Pokemon starters. And of course, down at the bottom, we've got Squirtle. Not because I hate Squirtle, but he's the water type. So if anything, he's putting the fires out. Next up, we got Bulbasaur. Partly because, Bulbasaur beats Squirtle, obviously. But also because I maybe didn't love this album, but under the right circumstances, or maybe after a few more listens, I could see, just a little bit of spark kind of getting my interest going. But as of now, I just don't love it. Next up, we got Charmander, obviously, meaning I probably liked the record quite a bit. Charmeleon, I loved it even more. Charizard, obviously, I thought it was some of the best stuff on the list. And for this list, I'm only doing whatever is on this list that was released in the 60s and before. There's albums on there from the 70s, 80s, and 90s as well. But it's 100 records, so I'm just going to kind of separate them by decades. So this is the 60s and whatever came out before it that was on this list. So here we go. Looks like these are just in alphabetical order. We are starting off with Albert Eiler's Live in Greenwich Village, 1966 and 67. I've never been a huge fan of Albert Eiler, though I respect him immensely just as a performer. And, he's for sure an incredible player. I'm just not quite there with enjoying a lot of his music quite yet. Though, to be fair, that's kind of how I felt about a lot of the other sax players around this time. Ornette Coleman, Pharoah Sanders, even John Coltrane to an extent. I didn't really get or love at first, so I think there's still some hope for me with Albert Eiler, but for now, I'm going to put him in the Bulbasaur tier. I think someday I'll get there. I'm just not there yet. I'm sorry. I feel bad. That feels bad to put him there, but I don't know. I'm just not quite there yet with him. Next up, we got Alexander Skip Spence with Ore. I do not enjoy this album in the slightest. This is like one of those really avant-garde, psychedelic kind of folk. It's like some folk and some rock and just overall general avant-garde psychedelia feel to whatever it is he's doing. And I just don't think really any of it comes off well. And I also find it kind of sad, just like his mental state at the time being, just into a lot of drugs and having a lot of genuine mental health issues that I think shortly after this he was, committed to a hospital for. So, and this just kind of sounds like he's very scared and confused at times. It's not an enjoyable listen for me at all. And just given the context of the backstory, I don't really enjoy it. So I'm going to put this one in Squirtle. Moving on, we got Blue Cheer's debut, Vincebus Eruptum, which is one of the few albums I did know on this list beforehand. I really appreciate this album's lineage and heritage within the greater, hard rock, heavy metal, genre and development. And the two covers that are on here are really great, the Summertime Blues and Parchment Farm. But outside those two, the original tracks on here, I really don't get a lot out of. I understand that it's really early within the hard rock, heavy metal, genres, but a lot of the playing on here is very rudimentary. It's just, caveman fills on the drums, some pentatonic scales on the guitar, and just an overall, loudness to everything, which is fun for sure. It's a fun listen. I just don't think it's amazing. I think there's other stuff from this era that's maybe not quite as loud, but just as good, if not better. So while I do enjoy this one, I'm going to put it in the Charmander because it's not, my favorite necessarily, but I do think it's an important album. Moving on, we got Bill Dixon's Intents and Purposes. And I get a lot more out of this album every time I listen to it. I was kind of iffy on it on a first listen, but I've come back to this one actually a few times, and every time I listen to it, I get a little bit more out of it, just as far as kind of the overall atmosphere goes. Just having a better appreciation for a lot of the instruments in there, because there's some not too common instruments in jazz on here. You got some strings, like some violins or some cellos in here somewhere. You got like some timpani, just kind of like obscure percussion for the time going on in here. And overall, just kind of really has just a nice kind of atmosphere and mood to it that I don't think a lot of other jazz quite gets. So we're going to put this one up in Charmeleon. All right, next up we got Pearls Before Swine with Balaclava. And this is like a psychedelic folk album. The main standout of it for me is the production. There's a lot of unique things that go into just, the way they're panning or the way they're recording things or adding filters to vocals or having like some bird or like wind samples or something in the background. There's for sure some interesting production choices with it, which I think is the main reason to listen to it and probably why it's on this list. As far as the songwriting goes, though, I don't find most of it very exciting. So we're going to put this one in the Bulbasaur tier, right under Albert Eiler there. I also don't really understand why this album is on here when the following album on here is Buffy St. Marie's Illuminations, which is another psychedelic folk album from like within a year of that one, and is far superior in my opinion in every way. It also does a few weird production choices here and there, which I think it actually does a little bit better. But more importantly, when it's not doing weird production stuff, you just get some good folk songs, and her voice is pretty stellar all the way through. You got some just really pretty acoustic guitar going on most of the time. It's overall leaps and bounds better than the Pearls Before Swine one, in my opinion. So we're going to put this one up here in Charmeleon. All right, next up we've got a record from the 20s. I think this was 1928. This is Blind Willie Johnson's single, Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, with the B-side being Nobody's Fault But Mine. And that one is an absolute like bona fide blues standard, being covered by, probably every blues band imaginable. Led Zeppelin probably most notably. But Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground is absolutely one of the standouts on this whole list. I mean that record is just within the blues canon alone stands out, because it's not just a straight up 12-bar blues. It's not necessarily doing like a shuffle or a swing feel all the way through it. It's kind of just him like very patiently working his way through playing some nice blues melodies and doing some gospel style humming over most of it. And it's a truly beautiful recording. And this is going straight into Charizard. I think this is one of the best things on this list for sure. Next up, we got William S. Burroughs with Burroughs. This is basically just the author, William S. Burroughs, reading excerpts from his books. I believe he kind of like chopped them up and rearranged them, so it's kind of like a non-linear way of storytelling, but you only get excerpts of books here anyway, so you don't really get a lot out of it. I wasn't very familiar with him or his work before this, and this recording is literally just him reading his books. That's basically it. There's no sound effects, there's no tape manipulation, there's no music going on. This is one of the more abstract ones on this list, because it's here just, I guess, because nobody had done that at that point, or maybe at least not an author like of his status. But yeah, I don't really get a lot out of this one. It's just a guy reading a book, which if you like William S. Burroughs, then maybe you would get a lot out of this. He does have a good timbre to his voice. And I know this one had kind of a reputation back in the day when it came out. But I don't personally get a lot out of it, so I'm putting it in the Squirtle tier. Next up, we got the two like legends of flamenco from this era, Paco de Lucia and Camarón de la Isla. Apologies for mispronunciations, but these are like the two guys in flamenco guitar at this time, just coming together to make one of the best flamenco records you could have. The playing on here is just absolutely immaculate. Just like, they're playing back and forth is just incredible. I don't mind the vocals on here, but if you're not familiar with this kind of music or this kind of like vocal delivery, it might be a little bit much for you. There's some like very strong vibratos on here. I kind of tend to like that stuff, so it doesn't bother me. We're going to put this one in the Charmeleon tier. There we go. All right, next up we got Other Worlds, Other Sounds from Esquivel. And I do like quite a bit of Esquivel from this era. He is for sure one of the, in my opinion, one of the better arrangers, at least within this style and conductors of this style in this era. And there's a lot of really good stuff on this album. I think about half of it is pretty good, and the other half is kind of, it goes a little bit too loungy for me, a little bit too far in like the Exotica direction. So we're going to put this one in the Charmander. We'll actually put this one above Blue Cheer, though, just a little bit. Next up, we got Dr. John with Grigri, and I seem to be in the minority of this one. Everything I've read online just like is endless praise about this album. I was obviously not alive when this came out, so I don't know what the general reception of it was or would have been, around people that I knew. So all I can really go on is what's online, and people seem to praise this pretty much universally, and I just get absolutely nothing out of it. It doesn't seem atmospheric or moody enough to really hold my attention when there's not a lot going on, and that's most of the time. It seems like there's just like not a lot happening, which in general I'm okay with, especially if there's some kind of atmosphere, but I don't think this captures the atmosphere very well at all. So we're going to put this one in the Squirtle. All right, next up we got husband and wife duo BB and Louis Barron. This is an absolutely astounding record just to listen to. This came out in the mid-50s, 56, I think. It's the soundtrack for the movie Forbidden Planet. And I mean, dang, did they do an incredible job at making this sound like a forbidden or, some kind of extraterrestrial planet that we're just discovering, or, something that's just far in the future. I haven't seen the movie. I don't know if it's more about like aliens or robots or something, or like what really the deal is, but they did an incredible job with this score. I mean, honestly, this was the first film score that was electronic all the way through, and they did the sound effects for it and everything. It's pretty incredible. If you haven't heard any 50s electronic music, this is a good place to start, because it's pretty wild, and even today kind of sounds futuristic. I mean, it sounds a little bit dated because it was from the 50s and it was like in these sci-fi movies, but you can see how for the time this would have been like just otherworldly to people watching this movie. So we're putting this up in Charmeleon. Next up, we got Charles Ives' Fourth Symphony. They refer to him as the father of American music in the article that they wrote, a little excerpt for this. I don't know if that's quite true. I'm not debating that. It could be. I don't know if I quite have all the context, but I do like a lot of Charles Ives' music, and this is for sure one of his best symphonies. If you're going to listen to Charles Ives, this is one to listen to. I mean, it does all the things you want in your classical music and your symphonies. It's very intense. It's very dynamic. It's very beautiful in parts. It does all the things. This is a great, great symphony, especially for 20th century, like early 20th century classical music. Next up, we got Joe Harriet's Abstract. I'm not like a super huge Joe Harriet fan. I guess I just don't really quite connect with his playing, I guess kind of like Albert Ayler. But if I'm going to listen to Joe Harriet, it would be this album. I do think this is the best he has to offer, at least from this era. But it's still not one that I really come back to all that often. Maybe someday. We'll put this in Bulbasaur. We'll put it right under Albert Ayler, though. All right, next up we got Michael Gottfried Koenig, with just kind of a compilation of like his recordings from this period of mid-60s to late 60s. This is kind of like your standard beeps and boops type electronic music, and just a lot of like sound collages and tape manipulation and just like making a bunch of noise. I personally love that kind of stuff, even if it's just from like a historical perspective of like, wow, this is like crazy that they made all these random sounds. I don't think this is really the best that the decade has to offer as far as that kind of sound goes, but it is a fun one. It's got some good stuff on here. We're going to put this in Charmander. Next up, we got Spontaneous Music Ensembles, Karyobin, and I don't really get a lot out of this one either. This, to me, is kind of like the stereotypical jazz where people are like, it's just a bunch of squeaks and squawks, or like, can they just play the right notes? That's kind of what this sounds like to me. It's very sparse, and when they are playing, I don't think it sounds very good. It's not personally for me, although I like a lot of free jazz type stuff from this era, I just don't think this is a very good version of it. So we're going to put this in Squirtle. We'll actually put this at the top of the Squirtle. Maybe more of a War Turtle record. All right, next up we got Joe Meek's I Hear a New World. This was essentially him trying to like take, the kind of futuristic electronic sounds and fuse them a little bit with like some of the modern pop music, I guess, in quotes there, of the time. It really ends up being more like country rockabilly, and compared to the soundtrack we were talking about earlier for Forbidden Planet, it just really falls flat as far as having the futuristic sounds. And I think the kind of rockabilly angle of it kind of really holds it back a little bit. And I do really admire what he was going for. I just don't know if the execution was really all that good. We'll put this in Bulbasaur. All right, next up we got Steve Reich's early works. I think this is specifically in reference to Come Out and possibly It's Gonna Rain, which are the two on here that are more like tape manipulation oriented and like his phasing. And again, I love all that kind of 60s electronic tape manipulation, sound collage type stuff. But yet again, this isn't my personal favorite, though I am a huge Steve Reich fan. He is one of my favorite composers, and I do think he does it mostly better than your other people from this era. We're going to put this in the top Charmander. All right, next up we got Ram John Holder's Black London Blues, and for me personally, my interest in blues kind of wanes by this point in time. This was 1969. I tend to have less interest in blues the further we get. And this, I don't think is the most exciting. It's got, overall some really good playing and some pretty good production on it. And I like his voice fine enough. I just don't find it really does a lot that I think is that interesting as far as, I wouldn't listen to this over, any other blues record from this era. So we'll put this in Bulbasaur. Next up, we got Phil Ochs, Retirements for Rehearsals. This is my personal favorite Phil Ochs record. I think his wit and satire is just in absolute top form on this one. If you're not really paying attention, you'll just hear him say like some most off the cuff stuff in some of these songs. You're just like, oh man, I forgot I was listening to Phil Ochs for a second. Performances, his voice, again, I think in top form. A lot of the playing on here, of course, is great. But yeah, Phil Ochs, just such a poignant songwriter. And I think this is personally for me his best. We're going to put this up in Charmeleon. Put this, we'll put this at the top of the Charmeleons. Next up, we got Silver Apple's Contact. This is their second album. And honestly, I think this one's just about as good as their first. This one seems to kind of lean more into the psychedelic. Their first one was very psychedelic, but I don't know. This one just seems a little bit heavier, a little bit more raw, almost kind of like a punk edge to it. Not literally, obviously, because the punk wasn't really much of a thing quite at this point, but it's definitely going in that direction of just having a more abrasive sound. I think this is actually kind of a hidden gem, not only in their discography, which isn't very big anyway, but just from this point in time, some really solid stuff, just kind of adding electronic elements to, they did such a good job of integrating that kind of thing into their psychedelic rock music. So I'm going to put this up in Charmeleon. All right, next up we got Sunhouse, Father of Folk Blues, and while this is technically a mid-60s recording, Sunhouse was in his heyday back in the, I think, 30s and 40s. That's when he did most of his writing and performing and playing, and where most of his best stuff is just, unfortunately, he didn't get recorded during really any of that time. Given his age, his voice is a little bit gruffer than it probably would have been, I assume, when he was younger, but I think that actually kind of lends itself and fits nicely into just his style of playing and kind of the way he writes and the lyrics and everything. I think this is a pretty great blues record, and an important one, I think, historically speaking. We'll put this in Charmander, we'll put it at the bottom here of Charmeleon. All right, next up we got Sonny Sherrick's Black Woman. Absolutely straight up to Charizard. I think this is one of the best jazz records, from this era for sure. It's also just a personal favorite of mine. This is also one of the few I knew before going into this list. Sonny Sherrick is if you're not really into jazz, I would still recommend checking out Sonny Sherrick. This album especially, but honestly, kind of any of his stuff. I mean, he has such a unique style of playing. None of his playing sounds like anything else really before or after, except for people who are trying to imitate him. And I mean, his playing is just so insane on this album, and it's topped even by his wife Linda on here, who is just like, I mean, there's times where she's just like singing with like such like a beautiful voice. It's so angelic, and then the next second she's like screaming and it's just like shrieking on top of all this chaos, and it's just like such a great dichotomy. There's some just truly great performances on here. Overall, it's great. Honestly, if you're like a metal fan, I would recommend checking this out too, because his playing is not entirely unlike, you know, a lot of the tremolo picking you would get in, you know, most metal. And obviously, like I said, she's screaming through a lot of it. So it's a unique record. I think one of the highlights of 60s era jazz in general. So next up, another great jazz record. We got Stan Kenton's City of Glass. I mean, start to finish, this album sounds pretty crazy. If you're thinking like, 50s jazz, I don't know, it's kind of loungy, it's kind of boring compared to a lot of what would come in the 60s, and I would agree in a lot of the cases, but this one, not at all the case. This is a really, it's an early example, but also one of the better examples of like third stream, mixing jazz and classical together. But it just sounds absolutely like nothing else from this era. And the first, I guess it kind of depends on which version you're looking at, but the first like 5 tracks I think on here were actually even recorded in the 40s, 1947 I think. And then the actual title track, City of Glass, that whole like, you know, suite or whatever is the 1953 recording. But overall, I mean, everything on here just sounds pretty otherworldly compared to what most jazz or classical sounded like at the time. So this is a Charizard one. All right, next up we got United States of America by United States of America. Again, I don't know really why they included this one and also the Silver Apples one, because they're both kind of like psychedelic rock plus electronic. This album does also an incredible job of just adding electronic elements to their psychedelic rock music. And again, also kind of a little bit of a punk edge, both in how kind of raw the sound is, but also in their lyrics, kind of critiquing politics at times, critiquing like hippie culture and stuff like that. So honestly, a very forward-thinking record ahead of its time. All right, and our last one for the 60s on this list is Sun Ra's Strange Strings. This is not my personal favorite Sun Ra album, though I do admire the concept and honestly the purity of it. The story is that he hired, you know, his usual group of horn players and brass players and all that, and then just gave him string instruments and said, here, play these. And then recorded it. And that was it. There was no like prep time. There was no learning to play an instrument. It was just make whatever noise you want to make the best you can on these instruments. And there is a purity to that. But unfortunately, the execution I don't think is amazing. I mean, if you're not familiar with Sun Ra, it's probably going to sound the same as most of his other stuff. But while there are good moments to this album, I don't think it's nearly his best. So we're going to go ahead and put this actually at the top of the Bulbasaur here. I don't know. Maybe someday it'll just hit me and I'll be in love with all the strings. I love the concept. The execution leaves me wanting a little bit more. There we go. All the albums from the 60s from The Wire. Next time, we'll do the 70s.